You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. Thanks for listening. The interview subject I've got prepared for you, the cavalcade of stars continues, because you're about to listen to a conversation with Dirk Verbeuren from Megadeth, Soilwork, and the reason for the chat on this episode, Cadaver. Cadaver have a brand new album out, soon, that is, on the 27th of November 2020, called Eder Bile. We talk about that, and also the EP that's in market currently. You can check that out on Spotify or Apple Music, called DGAF. But it wouldn't be a conversation with Dirk if we didn't talk about Megadeth as well, and we also managed to chat about the great and legendary Steve DiGiorgio and some of the work Dirk has done and is planning, it turns out, with him. So here he is, Dirk Verbeuren.
Hey, Andy, how's it going, man?
It's going very well, brother. How's things for you?
Very well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. There's a bit of a delay, but all good otherwise. No worries.
Sweet.
Right. I love the soil work poster that you got up the back there, mate.
Oh,
Is it an award, is it? That's cool.
Yeah, it's like this lighted sign that they had made when we played Bakken one day, and nobody else in the band took it, so I was like, all right, I'll take it.
I love that, man. Yeah, I love your work there, with Bjorn, because I think Bjorn's one of my favorite interview subjects, actually, I've got to say. And, he just seems to have worked with so many great musicians, such as yourself and Ralph Santola and the like. Good musicians attract good musicians, mate.
I like to believe so. But yeah, Bjorn's amazing, man. He truly is.
Well, look, I got to tell you, I'll kick things off, I suppose. Are you on what sort of time scale are you on at the moment? Have we got 20 minutes or so, or a bit longer?
Yeah, we probably got a bit longer. I think actually, let me double check. Yeah, you're my last interview today, so I don't have another one waiting after you.
Sweet. Well, I'll make it worthwhile then. Rest assured, I'll make it fun and interesting. So, look, let's talk about Cadaver, of course, because that's a compelling event for the conversation. Look, I was searching. I do this with interviews and with new releases like this. So I was searching for a sentence to summarise what you've come up with. That is, Cadaver have come up with what you've conjured across the EP and also the album. And this is what I came up with. It's a bit, you probably heard this before, but here goes. Putrid, brutal, and blasting grindcore commissioned by the devil himself. There you go.
I like it. That's great.
And I think on a serious note, I think you truly are. The pair of you here, Anders and yourself, you're giving Sam Lee and Pete and Terrorizer a run for their money. Within a few years now, we've got two of the best sounding grindcore albums I've ever heard. The songwriting's great, but the sound is what I'm talking about. And even last night, I had a chat to Daz from Benediction as well, and their album this year sounds great. It's so great to hear. I'm not going to say reactivated, but you know what I'm saying. They're bands that went away for a bit now have come back, and the quality's still there. And for an old fan like me, that's so important, because so many of my memories from childhood, teenage years. I'm 42, so teenage years up to now, they're wrapped around listening to bands that you've been in and Benediction and the like. So, after all of that, mate, I know you're a busy fella. You've got a lot going on. And there's that other band, the other band that everybody knows that you're in. I'm sure we'll chat about that. But look, from Cadaver's perspective, it's been 16 years. So why did you and Anders decide to partner and, resurrect the old beast?
Well, I mean, it just kind of happened, It was really nothing planned. I met him because back in 2014, early in that year, I got a call from Satyricon, from Satyr, if I could fill in for him on 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise, because, Frost at the time couldn't come into the US.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, I having been a Satyricon fan for a really, really long time, of course, I was very happy to do that. And Anders plays bass in Satyricon. And so we got to talking, and I got to, I got to tell him how much of a fan of Cadaver I was, and how Hallucinating Anxiety, the first album, kind of really stood out to me at the time, being a teenager. And it was just this very unique sound and a very unique record. And he's like, well, you know what? The band hasn't been around for a while, but I haven't stopped writing stuff. So would you like to hear it? And of course, I wasn't going to say no to that. So So from there, we just kind of started working on things when we had time. And in 2016, at one point, I was in Norway briefly, and we got to even jam together. And that kind of set the course for let's do a record. This is working great. We get along. We have fun. We're on the same page. We both kind of have the same background. He's a little bit older than me, and he was making music before I was, but I grew up with all that stuff. It's really important to me, so we kind of understand how Cadaver should sound, I guess, today is the best way to put it.
So did Anders write the music and then send it to you via Google Drive or what have you, or were you actually integral to the songwriting process?
No, for the most part, he wrote the stuff and would send it to me. He had some stuff laying around. We started working on that way. And then in 2016, so a couple of years after we had started, when I got a chance to jam with him, that kind of became that jam, which turned into Feed the Pigs, this third song on the album. That kind of became the blueprint for what the album was going to be. So we actually at that point discarded some of the stuff we had worked on so far, which was some of it we kept, but a lot of it we're like, maybe we should just more go in this direction. And then from there, he would just send me things and I would send them back, and he'd be like, that's not at all the drums I imagined, but it's great. So let's keep it, So It's kind of like the way we worked together was kind of like somebody would bring an idea and then the other person would bring a totally unexpected idea and like, oh, this is killer. And then it would lead songs in a certain direction, if that kind of makes sense. So it was a very organic process. We just kind of naturally, worked together in a way where things just fell into place. So it was very fun, very effortless in a way. And before we knew it, we had a bunch of songs, and he came over here to LA where I live, and we hopped into the studio.
Hey, how do you find living in LA? Because I understand you're from Antwerp originally. Was it a bit of a culture shock going there? Because I know I had culture shock there, to be honest with you. Do you find that when you're over there? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. At first, I was pretty lost, So I lived in France for a long time. I grew up in Antwerp, and then, outside of Antwerp in a small town, and then I lived in France and Paris, which is a bigger city, not like LA, but bigger at least. And then I lived again in a smaller city there, where I went to music school and started doing music. But when I came here, it was definitely at first, finding my bearings took a while. My wife, who I moved here for and who had lived here already, she kind of knew her way around. So in the beginning, I relied a lot on her. And but once it's with these big, this is a massive city. It's sprawling. And so when you start kind of knowing where to go and what's where, then you start to be able, at least for me, to appreciate the kind of the vibe that lives here. And obviously the climate being pretty genius, like being really nice, like most of the year, even though
it's like here, it's like Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very similar. So once you fall into that, it becomes hard to imagine going back to Belgium or France, which are beautiful places and have a lot of good stuff, but they also have a lot of crap weather.
Yeah, I was going to say, the culture and the history there is unprecedented. You can spend your entire life not even touching the surface, really, but the weather sucks. It's like people here who live in Melbourne, which is a bit similar to Europe.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and I would really miss Europe if I never got to go there. But obviously, with my job, I get to be there, I get to tour there, I get to visit my family and stuff. So in the meantime, LA is great because everything with music is here. I'm just here, and all the people I work with will come around at some point. So it's awesome. I don't have to go anywhere for that.
Hey, just talking about the sound that you captured then on the album here. So the album, of course, is called Eder Bile, and the EP was called DGAF. And I couldn't really hear that there was a lot of differences between the two. So were they recorded in the same sessions, or were they different sessions?
Well, it's interesting. There were actually two sessions, but the EP songs were actually recorded at the same time as most of the album, and there are some songs on the album that were recorded at a later session. So because we just felt like once we had the album songs, there was one song I think that we discarded, which we didn't think lived up to the hype.
Oh yeah.
And then Anders had these new ideas, so he's like, "Man, I want to come back and just record a few more songs." And one of them ended up being "Circle of Morbidity," which was the first single.
Nice, great song.
Like he did for Decibel magazine, and he really felt like he wanted that song to be, kind of the what would bring people to the new Cadaver, like Cadaver V3, so to speak. So, but yeah, the recording, I'll tell you, one thing we wanted to do is really respect the old school tradition of jamming together. So we, most of the songs were recorded, him and I playing together in the room without click
Is that
track,
right?
just hammering it out. Yeah, because I really insisted on that. And that's one of the things I like about all that, thrash, death, black, grindcore that was created in the, early 80s to early 90s, was just that raw feeling that you get when you don't try to control things too much. So we decided to like give it a shot. Let's do this. Let's play together and see where it leads us. And it worked out. So, it sounded good. And now we all agree that like after trying it, like the next album, we're definitely going to do it the same way again. Just try and let the music breathe in the way that it wants to breathe.
I'm so glad you say the next album, because that was going to be one of the questions I had, because I think, it's, like bands sort of come together and you do this, but I know money is at the center of it all, because it has to be, being realistic. You got no doubt, if you haven't got a family, you may be planning one, but you still got living expenses, and there's the other band that you're in that I said, and, time is of the essence, but also, these things have to sell. They have to actually make an impact.
They do, and we're in a very strange time when it comes to that, a transitional time, because I don't know if you see the album sales nowadays. I get this email every week from Ryan Downey, a great guy who kind of compiles all numbers of streams and etc. It's very interesting to see how a band like Pearl Jam releases an album and it sells 70,000 copies, and somebody commented they probably gave away more promos like that than that in the 90s, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. So album sales are really nothing anymore, and but at the same time, we're similar age. I'm 45, so we grew up in an era where albums were everything, and you don't want to give up on that because they tell a story and they have their own era, they have their own aura and vibe, and so it's something that personally I always want to keep doing. And even if the album becomes more of a means to do other things that then generate money versus the album being the central thing that sells and you tour to promote it, that's fine too, as long as we can make it work, and as long as the passion is there, and a label like Nuclear Blast is there willing to jump in behind it, which, we're so happy that they stepped in and saw the value in this, and have really been, I have to say, I've worked with Nuclear Blast for many years, obviously through Slow Work, and, they've been close to my heart for a long time, but they really stepped it up on this album, and they believe in it. So that's obviously essential in keeping on with the band, as you said.
I'm absolutely with you on that point. I sat in on one of those media things on Zoom, like this platform here, for Michael Schenker about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He was doing a question and answer thing, and it was a Nuclear Blast hosted thing. And it was in that moment, I think, I always understood the value that Nuclear Blast brought to the market, but hearing an artist as esteemed and as critically acclaimed as yourself say the things that I'm thinking about the label, they're really doing a community service in a lot of ways, aren't they?
They really are, and I think there's a lot of passionate people in there that are really, going the extra mile to make these things happen, because for them too, it's a transitional period. And I'm pretty sure, without having had extended discussions about their finances, because I have no idea how all that works, but obviously there's a lot going on there too, to be able to keep that machine from rolling. And so, one could argue that, it's time for the downfall of labels, because they've long been taking way too much of a cut and stuff. And, to some extent, I can agree with that. It's been that way since releasing albums was invented in the time of blues.
1930s,
the artist always got this tiny cut. And now you have something like Bandcamp where an artist gets 75%, which is absolutely amazing. And I love Bandcamp so much. I hope it always keeps going. But on the other hand, as many people who have tried to self-release an album will attest. Just ask Obituary, or ask like Devin Townsend, or recently Kiko Loureiro, who released his solo album as an online crowdfunding campaign. It's a ton of work, and that's, I think, when a lot of people realize, wow, the label really does do a lot of stuff that as an artist don't necessarily want to spend like months and months doing, because I want to be writing music, I want to be playing music, I want to be doing interviews. So in a way, I don't know how it's all going to go and how things are going to like how the puzzle pieces are all going to fit together in the end. But I'm very happy that, you know, labels like ND are there to, you know, and also a lot of other labels to kind of keep the ball rolling.
Very well summarized, mate. Yeah, very accurate summary of the situation right there. And yeah, it's I hear a lot of people bag on the labels, and there are some shitty just about all of the majors. Yeah, they do rip bands off. They put them on 8 and 9 deals, but Roadrunner were doing that back in the day as well. Deicide, I understand, were the only band to fulfill a contract with Roadrunner. So it's not just the it's the indies too that were pissing bands around, but Nuclear Blast, I think I haven't heard anything. Look, there probably is negative stories, but I certainly haven't heard any. And I've spoken to 600 of you guys at this point in time. You know, full-on musicians who have contracts and management and stuff. And look, yeah, Napalm, Sumerian, there are some really good indies out there. You know, Osmos. I think I heard some things here and there. I know there's some shit going on with Earache at the moment. You know, with Dan Seagrave. Have you been seeing that online? What's going on there? You following it?
Yeah, I am. You know, I'm interested because Earache was my label as a teenager. Like anything Earache I bought, I would receive their promo cassettes. I would get their flyers in the mail and be like, I'm going to buy that and that. And I spent all the little money I had with going on Earache stuff. So for me, it was like, for many years, the biggest thing. And then to see kind of that, you know, all those bands, whether it's Napalm, Cathedral, Brutal Truth, all the bands that were on there, eventually all started saying like, this label is a huge ripoff. They owe us money, this and that. It was just this huge downfall over time, you know, coupled with the fact that they started making some artistic choice that didn't really maybe fit in with a lot of their crowd. So it really was a fall from grace, and it's kind of a shame, you know, because it was really a massive, important name that did so much for extreme metal. So this is just another one of those things, you know, where unfortunately that carries on, and you know, it's the nature of the beast, though, man. You know, the way I look at it is like you're always gonna have clashes, you know, in this kind of setting. Like there's the music business contradiction, right? Those two words don't go together. So
great.
It's
no,
always
you're right.
Going to be a mess.
Yeah. Well, it was very, you know, I don't know him that well, but you know, Harold Mortis. We exchange messages from time to time, and I've interviewed him too, and I think he's a tremendous artist. You know, great, very unique. You know, and he's a black metal original as well. But I had to send him the video of Al Dawson from Earache talking about, because I asked Al a question on his Instagram feed. That was me that asked him about why the Mortis catalog was pulled. And Al actually did take the time to address it. He said, look, it's just a licensing thing. It just takes us, the company that we've licensed the recordings to put them up online effectively takes a while to get around to doing it. That's what I took from it. So sometimes it's the intentions there, but the execution isn't. So it's not always because a label's trying to fuck around an artist.
Right. Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And, you know, a lot of people in the same way, to take it back to Cadaver, asked the same thing about us, you know, because those couple of first albums are also not anywhere to be found. And I think the hard thing there is that, you know, and then somebody like Anders goes and asks those questions, like, is there something we can do? You know, you basically don't get much of an answer from what I understand. So that's where it's a little bit of a shame that, you know, I know those people, you know, when you work at a small label like Earache, it's not a huge label with like hundreds of people working there, not even close. So it's a lot of work, and you probably can't answer every inquiry. But when it comes to the bread and butter of your label, like the bands, you know, like some of those bands like Napalm that really made the label in a way with their sales at the time, you know, when they first came out. I mean, it's those are people that you want to go far in kind of establishing a good relationship. And I just think it's a shame that didn't happen. I don't know who's to blame and stuff, but when you have this many bands that are, you know, complaining about the same thing, there starts to be enough red flags where you're like, okay, you know, it's too bad, you know. But I'll always respect Earache, as you know, for what they did for this community, because they really, at one point, they really had their finger on the pulse of the underground more than anybody, you know. Even Nuclear Blast coming out at the time and all the other labels, I mean, you couldn't beat Earache in, you know, anywhere between like 87 and you know, I'd say 90 or something.
Altars of Madness. Right there.
And Grind Crusher, the compilation, that's probably like, you know, Grind Crusher is probably the compilation of all compilations when it comes to extreme metal. You know, there's been a few. That one to me is like every single band on there. You know, the original one that just had 10 bands, and they did the expanded version. But that original one, which also came with that 7-inch, which had You Suffer on one side and then Electro Hippies, like another 1 second song on the other side, which is absolutely brilliant, you know. I mean, that was just like, come on, like, respect, you know.
Add respect. Yeah, well, it's an authentic representation of what they're doing. you know, they're putting out there like it or lump it, you know, listen to it or fuck off. You know what I mean? It's just, this is what we do. This is who we are. And for kids back then, like you and I, we get that. And it's like, my people.
Exactly. That sums it up, man. That's it. It's that punk spirit, you know, it's that kind of rebellion against everything. And that music just embodied it well, right?
It reminds me of when I was talking to Phil Anselmo about this, but remember when the Lords of Chaos film was released? It was in theaters for one night. In Australia, I think it was. I think globally, it was just one night. They just went, let's blitz every theater on this single night. And near me here, like there's a mum and dad shopping mall. You know, there's mega shopping mall things. And they've got, you know, all the James Bond films and all of the other Frozen and all the things my daughters like to watch there. And the theater had gone to the trouble of actually dressing up this part of the theater where Lords of Chaos was playing with upside down crosses and hacked up bodies and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, we're impinging on the mainstream. We're just, fuck off. This is our space now. If you don't like it, don't be near us.
That's amazing. I love that, man. That's a great story. I didn't know that they had done that. That's amazing.
Yeah, they did it. But what they did was, I thought, I'll wait until I'll need to go to the bathroom or something like that because you can drink in there. And I went out and they pulled everything down. So they left it up for about half an hour only. That was probably, well, it's like I wanted to get a video and photos because they went to so much effort to do it. And I just so appreciated that they do it because it's so rare for what we love and what you do to be represented in the mainstream arena.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny that you mentioned the word arena because it made me think about that BBC Arena series back in the late 80s, I believe it was, where they had a heavy metal documentary in like 5 parts. And it started with like Ozzy and Metallica, bands that were sort of going mainstream at the time. I mean, Ozzy certainly was mainstream already. And Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, hosted it. And it ended in the last episode with Napalm Death. You know, remember that? And
yes,
that Napalm Death episode was just like, I couldn't believe one of my favorite bands was like on this huge TV station and it had so much attention where they were interviewing the guys and showing the performances. And I was just like, this is the best thing ever, you know?
Well, do you remember when, was it Napalm Death or Extreme Noise Terror teamed with KLF on the British Music Awards?
1 second. Sorry.
You're right.
You're using it. Sorry, 1 second.
No, that's all right. Dog there, I get it. I've got a dog too.
Yeah, 3 dogs and a cat, and they're facing off currently. But my wife just took the dog back out of the room. Sorry, I have to ask you that question again.
No, that's fine. I was just saying I remember there was I've seen it on, I don't remember it at the time, but I've since seen it on YouTube. But no, it was Extreme Noise Terror. Now that I think about it, teamed with the KLF for a British.
Yeah.
Remember that? And you could see the audience going, "What is this?" You know, they had no idea. You could see the smartasses in the audience going, "Oh yeah, we get it. You're just punking us."
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think it's always going to stay some kind of a counterculture movement, you know, and that's part of why I love it, because it's kind of like, it's my own identity, very much the style of music it always has been, and it's something that just by its nature, I mean, if you listen, like for example, to the Cadaver album, it can't conceivably become a mainstream thing. It's just too intense for and extreme for most people to get a grasp on, you know. So but those who understand, you know, those who know, they get such pleasure out of it, right? So that's kind of the beauty of this whole thing to me, and it always will be.
I've got to switch and now talk about Megadeth for a bit, you know, because I feel like your inclusion, I think Chris's inclusion and now your inclusion brings some, and I'm not heaping shit on Dave here at all, but it brings a lot of credibility to the band, a shitload of credibility to people like me, because I'm an old school Megadeth fan, but I tuned out for years, like maybe 20 years. You can understand, you know. And I got to be honest, I just think Dave's pursuit of, you know, the Lightspeed God of Thunder, I don't want to, and I'll preface this by saying I don't want to put you in a difficult position by having to answer something, if you know what I mean, because I hear rumors about Dave being difficult to work with, and I don't want to put you in I put Frank Ferrer from Guns N' Roses in a similar position, to be honest with you, and then I thought, should I have done that, you know? But I guess my point is that I think Dave's pursuit of the Lightspeed God of Thunder thing has come at the expense of melodic balance. So songs like 99 Ways to Die and Angry Again are my favorite Megadeth cuts, by the way. Like, I love the thrash stuff, but when he gets that blend right, he's just unbeatable. Some of the best I would even say 99 Ways to Die, in my view, is my favorite heavy metal song ever recorded, because it's just got everything. It's got that nice flamenco flourish from Marty that I know Kiko can do in his sleep. The drumming is something that you can do fairly easily, with all due respect to Nick Menza. But do you have a lot of input into the way to the songwriting, the songwriting process?
I mean, I wouldn't say a lot, because obviously, Dave is the man, right? As we know, and it's his vision, and it always has been. Whenever there's been a Megadeth album that came out, sure, there have been, obviously in the early years it was more of a collaborative thing with Ellefson and the early members, but it's always been Dave. A majority of the ideas usually have come from Dave, and then a lot of how it turns out in the end is kind of through Dave's filter. So, but this being said, he did allow us quite some freedom. I was actually a little bit surprised at how much freedom I had ultimately in the studio to kind of try things and, add little things that I would do on drums versus, what was typically done in Megadeth, and just kind of be like, oh, add this accent here and do that. And he loved it. So, I got a lot of freedom to do that. And then he also invited everybody to contribute to the writing process as well. So I did that too. I play guitar too. So I actually wrote some stuff on guitar, and I don't know yet going to be on the album or not, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But that was all welcomed with open arms, and was worked on together and perfected and turned into Megadeth songs. So I think I really can't complain about that part of it. I think when it comes to the style of the album and stuff, it's really too early to tell. And I'm like you, my first record was Peace Cells that I bought, so that's kind of like my Megadeth forever, in a way. But I also really love the whole period around Euthanasia and Countdown and those songs, 99 Ways to Die, Angry Again. We actually played Angry Again for the first time live together on the last tour we did, which was just before the pandemic hit over in Europe, and that was a lot of fun. That song all of a sudden came up, and it happened in the tour. Dave was like, "Hey, you guys want to play Angry Again?" And then so that same night we played it. So it was like go to studying, writing down the parts, and then boom, there you go. That's kind of how it goes. But this being said, I think we always get connected to a point in time that we think is like a band's, apex in a way. And for a lot of people, that's going to be this, and then some people it's going to be that, etc. But at the same time, Megadeth 2020 is it's Megadeth 2020, and I can't even tell you what that is right now, because I haven't heard anything finished. I haven't heard anything with vocals. It's still all in process, but it's never going to be, I tried to kind of let go of the idea of, a band, bringing back something that they've been before. I mean, some of my favorite bands like Napalm Death, Godflesh, they're bands that keep pushing, and you want certain elements to be there, right? So you don't want a Napalm Death album without blast beats per se, or you don't want a Godflesh album without those heavy crushing riffs. But at the same time, I've accepted over the years that, like, look, nobody's ever going to touch Scum, not even Napalm is, or in another order, Fear, Emptiness, Despair, which is like a completely unique album to me in their catalog. And the same with Godflesh. To listen to the new Godflesh album, it's in the beginning I had to really try to understand it, because it's so different. Like the first song is a very typical Godflesh song, and then the next two are kind of typical Godflesh, and then it just veers off into madness, and it took me a while to kind of grasp that last, 3/4 of the record, and now I absolutely love it. And those to me are like the best records, are the records that challenge you, but because the band is great and it's quality stuff, you give it enough tries to where it starts entering your brain and you start understanding this is what they're doing. I get it now, So I'm hoping that, long story short, I'm hoping this Megadeth album will kind of be that in a way where, there's going to be some different things in there, but hopefully people will embrace it. And I have to say, I was really adamant in bringing back, the roots.
Yes.
So
I can tell.
If I have my way, if I have my way, and if those make it onto the album, there's going to be some really happy old school thrash fans.
Yeah. Well, I agreed. And look, I think Dave must have seen the writing on the wall when he recruited Chris, that he needed to reconnect with his audience, the core audience, people like me who give a shit, who bought the CDs, the T-shirts, the flags, went to the concerts, bought the tour T-shirt. Like his whole attempt at going for the radio audience was frankly misguided, my opinion. As I say, I won't put you in a difficult position to have an opinion on that one there, but he lost his way through whole swathes of the band's career, and it never made any sense to me, because he'd release an album as United Abominations, and then he'd release Super Collider, and it was like, what the hell? What are you doing? It didn't make any sense, to be honest with you. And James Lomenzo is a tremendous right-hand man, like David is too. So he's always had the great musicians, but I just think with bringing Chris in and now yourself, and to an extent Kiko too, because Kiko is one of us, you know what I mean? Like a true heavy metal guitarist and original, like you, but my question after all that for you, mate, is, you grew up with Megadeth like I did. Is it weird stand on the drum stool behind Dave Mustaine as he's just launching into the solo in My Darkest Hour and stuff?
I mean, if anything, it's just great, man. It's like, I take those moments in and it never gets old, even after a lot of touring, and, even when you're tired and you're like, okay, I've been on the road for a while, I'm ready to go home. You still got to appreciate that, you're a part of something bigger than you, and I think even to an extent Dave is, because it wouldn't exist without all the people that come to every show and that are there chanting the lyrics and just being excited. And so we're all part of something bigger in a way. Me, of course, being the kid that listened to Megadeth and saw them on the Clash of the Titans tour, way back, and then now is on stage with them. Like, of course, I get an extra dose of that, but I just, I look at it as like, it's something that I want to enjoy all the time that I get with that. Nobody knows how long it's going to be. I mean, we all know Dave dealt with cancer last year, and so far so good. But you never know with that stuff. My mom had, she passed away in 2016, actually, the same year that I joined Megadeth. And she, thank you, yeah, she had cancer 3 times in her life. She had cancer when I was a little kid, and then she had cancer many years later, and then the third time it finally took her. So, and I don't want to presage or jinx anything or do anything bad here. I hope to, to all gods and heavens that
fingers crossed.
Nothing like that happens to Dave. But at the same time, it really, going through something like what I went through with my mom, like to an extent, makes you really realize that, like, man, you got to enjoy what you got. You can't take things for granted. And so, and then Dave going through what he went through, and us being successful after all that on stage earlier this year in Europe, having a great tour, opening for Five Finger Death Punch to fill arenas, it was amazing. So, and we were really all like, how that was going to go. Is he going to be okay? Is this going to take too much of a toll on him? How's his voice going to be? And as the tour progressed, it just got better and better, and he regained his confidence, and it was amazing. And so I'm just really thankful, to be a part of all of it, and to be able to contribute whatever little bit I contribute to this massive legacy. That's the legacy of Megadeth, and Dave's legacy in many ways.
Well, you're doing a tremendous job. I'm not just pissing in your pocket, as we say in Australia, mate. I mean, you are doing a bloody good job there. And I don't think you could have got anybody better than you, mate, to do what you're doing up there, and just your attitude and how happy you are to be doing what you do. I think that's so important, because, we as fans, mate, we only hear the music, and I'm very fortunate that I do get to talk to the musicians such as yourself. But, it does mean a lot to us. You know what I'm saying, to the fans. It means a hell of a lot to the heavy metal fan. We are unique, as you know, because you're a fan. We're unlike any other music fan in the business, because the whole thing is important.
Exactly. And that's why it was so important for me to try and, connect some of the old Megadeth with the new Megadeth. And that doesn't mean we have to redo Killing Is My Business or Peace Sells or Rust in Peace. It's none of that. It's just bringing back some of those elements. And I was fortunate in that I got to tour with the band for several years before even starting to write. So I got to become intimately familiar with the drum parts on all those songs, all the little details that Nick Menza played, or Gar Samuelson or Chuck Bieler, and kind of absorb all that into my own system. So when it came time to write, and I picked up my guitar to start writing stuff, all that was there, and all that experience and that new knowledge that you can only get from the inside kind of informed what came from the writing process. And so that was really important to me, because as you said, as a fan, I want that. At least it doesn't have to be like a whole record full of thrashing songs, but if there's some of that, like some elements of Black Friday or some elements of like Rattlehead or whatever, then I'm a happy camper, and so hopefully, hopefully we'll get there. Like I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, agreed. Mate, I better make this one my last question for you. I really appreciate your time, by the way. And I'm going to take a bit of a left-hand turn, but I only spoke to Steve DiGiorgio a couple of weeks ago, and we spoke for a couple of hours. Tremendous fellow, like yourself, mate. Just, an original. And in my opinion, I'm a bass player. A bit of my daughter's drums are just behind me there too. And we get into the rhythm right in this house here. But DiGiorgio was the bass master, and you both, I didn't realize, just before I got on the call, I checked and saw, yeah, you guys had worked together before in a project called Anatomy of Eye. I didn't even know it was out there. So what are your recollections of working with DiGiorgio?
Man, Steve is amazing. He's a great friend of mine for many years now. He's an absolutely a fella, as tells great stories. He's super funny. And a bass legend, one of the absolute best. Like his playing is just one of a kind. And so, yeah, we did the Anatomy of Eye album through our common friend Michael, who was actually the younger brother of a schoolmate of mine. And
Nice.
Michael, I knew him at the time when I was in high school and stuff. And Michael somehow connected with some of those people, including Steve. So many years later, he was like, "Hey, I'm putting together this project. I want to have Steve and you on it." So I was like, "Cool." And so we did that record, and it was actually my first recording on my E-drums, way back. It was the first time that I really sat and did that between parentheses. But so it was a learning curve for sure for me. But I've gotten a lot better at it since. But actually, Steve and I have done more stuff since. We did an album. You should look this up. It's a band called Gioda from Argentina. We recorded this a couple of years ago, and that's that one came out really, really cool. It's more along the lines of like, I would say, death and cynic kind of, without sounding like those bands,
yes.
but it's that kind of really progressive, crazy play. Steve is absolutely stellar on the record. Like, he sounds so cool. There's lots of just amazing stuff, like you'll see. And it's a really beautiful album with lots of ebb and flow. And also, last year, I did a few fill-in gigs. I like some rescue missions, and one of them was actually playing a show with Testament in Colombia at Ozfest there.
Oh,
and
nice.
So I actually got for the first time play together with Steve on stage, which was really, really great. It's because we've been friends for so many years, but I've never like actually in person jammed together. This was all be remote stuff, so it was really cool to be on stage with them and to play some Testament classics. That was a lot of fun. We got to hang out, and he told me all kinds of cool stories from the early days of Death and Sadus, and I'm a huge Sadus fan too, so that was all great to hear. Yeah, man. I mean, Steve is amazing. He's been probably my favorite metal bass player forever, and ever since Human and Sadus and all that stuff, And I actually, I've never told anybody this yet, but with my own grindcore band Ben C, recently I've been releasing songs as under the Instagrind series online. I'm just releasing songs one by one as I'm waiting for the debut album to get mixed and all that stuff. I'm just keep creating and just putting songs out. And one of them's actually going to have Steve on it. So you're the first one I'm telling this. I haven't told anybody this, but
Scoop, like it. Thanks.
He's going to be on the short little crazy grindcore tune. Yeah.
That's awesome, mate. Yeah, I love how all of my favorite musicians, you all get together somehow. And it's just this trip that seems to happen. As I say, I didn't realize you'd work with Steve, and now you're saying you're continuing to work with Steve. And I love that because, as I say, we live for this stuff, man. It's so meaningful to us that you actually put in the effort.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's all fun and really, I mean, sure, it has to pay the bills, of course. And a lot of times we have to make choices based on how we can keep doing this. And I'm sure that includes Steve and everybody else too. But to an extent, it's also like, man, once you become a part of this world and you're in the touring circuit and you tour with this band and then you play a festival with a bunch of bands, and of course you naturally, after a while, you start going up to the guys you look up to and like strike up a conversation. And then next thing you know, everybody's actually really cool and down to earth for the most part. And then, you just make the best of that later on by when there's a thing like Gioda as an example. He was looking for a bass player, and I'm like, man, you should get Steve. I know Steve, I've worked with him before. It's not like I'm like, hanging out with him all the time. I mean, he's up north of San Francisco. I'm down here in LA. We don't really hang out, but
yeah.
Of course, I couldn't recommend anybody better. And so he reaches out to Steve. I put them in touch, and then that ends up happening. And so those connections grow stronger. And it's a really beautiful thing about this scene is that, we all love the same stuff in the end, right?
Yes. No, it's very true, and I think I suppose it's the internet and how the speed of things in this day and age. It does make it possible, though, doesn't it? It's gone are the days where the James Hetfields of the world locked musicians into the one band, like famously Jason Newsted had to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that desire is still there, I think, but at the same time, it's like you got to be realistic. For example, at a time like this, with this global pandemic, where we're basically prohibited from touring for, we'll see how long. I mean, Megadeth has shows lined up in next summer, but let's see if they will happen or not. So, thankfully, we have the internet to not only stay in touch with our loved ones across the globe and or even sometimes close by that we can visit, but also to keep working. As musicians, we've been extremely fortunate in that we have the technology to keep, like, I do session work here. I have my drum students, most of which are online.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I mean, 20 years ago, forget it. We would be screwed. We would all be like, I don't know what we would be doing, to be honest with you. So nowadays, it benefits us in good and bad times. And I take full advantage of that. Whenever I have the chance to make people or be a part of something with people that I love or whose music I love, I'm all for it, man.
Well, mate, we're not going anywhere. So however long it takes for this bloody COVID thing to disappear off the face of the earth, God knows even if it will, but nobody's going anywhere, mate. There's always going to be people waiting for live heavy metal, and there's always that. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of it, but Lamb of God, I did one of those online things, those online performances the other day, and I think they did a bloody good job with it, actually. But it's not the same. We know that, but it's it's 10% of the 100% that you get if you're at the gig, but it's better than nothing.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I see Obituary is doing one too, so that's pretty killer. I think they're playing.
I'm gonna watch that.
Some records and stuff.
Yeah,
that's
I saw them.
Man. That's gonna be good. Was that?
I only saw them last year, actually, and I caught up with Trevor, and fuck, they're a good band, man. It was like, and I said this to Daz last night. We're at a point now where death metal's become dad rock, because I looked around me at the gig and we're all sort of in our mid-40s and having our light beer because we've got to drive home after the but we're all getting into it and yelling. It's the first time in years I remember shouting at the stage, and I was just so happy to be there. And I knew Ralph Santola, so I'm screaming, "Do it for Ralph, come on," like they're a bloody football team or something, or you just get right into it in the moment.
That's what's beautiful about it, man. I think it's the voice of a generation in a way. Yeah, sure. I don't know if the younger generation is going to catch on as much as we did at the time, but yeah, man. I mean, a band like Obituary, as an example, it never gets old to me.
No, it just
every time you see them live, there's such an energy that happens. There's such a vibe that's just only they could do it. You take Donald behind the drums and you put another drummer, and it's just not going to be the same. It has to be Donald, it has to be John on vocals, it has to be Trevor. That's Obituary. It's like, it's just amazing.
It's so true. Like in Australia, of course, we've got this massive ACDC love, and it's really pretty weird, I've got to tell you, amongst the local musicians here in Brisbane. They love fucking ACDC. Now, I can appreciate ACDC, but they're never going to be my alpha and omega, because I'm a bassist and that's not what they do. They're all about driving guitars, that's what that's about. But whenever an ACDC tune comes on and we're out drinking and just being idiots, they'll jump up and down and stuff like that, and I'll just sit there, and then I'll be in the car driving home or whatever, and I'll stick on, chopped in half or something, and I'm like, come on, that's me, that's what gets my blood pumping. And it's, we're rare, us diehard extreme metal fans, but we're here, and as I say, mate, we're not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Good, man, good. Yeah, I think once that lives in you, it lives in you forever. You can't get... Music has its own thing, It's like a virus, but a good one.
Absolutely it is. Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah. Well, mate, look, I'd better let you go. Thank you so much for your time, first and foremost. And
thank you, Andy. It's been so much fun, man. Great chat.
Well, just thanks for doing what you're doing, mate. It's very meaningful what you're doing, and I've said this, a few times now, to to you guys that are in the big bands doing what you do. But it is really important that you keep doing what you're doing, and it is very meaningful that you're doing what you're doing, and we appreciate it as fans, man. So just Godspeed, and I hope we see you down here again real soon.
Thank you, man. That's great to hear, and we're going to carry on.
All right, brother. Thanks so much for the chat. Appreciate it.
All my best, man. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks, mate. Catch ya. You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. That interview subject was the one and only Dirk Verbeuren from Soilwork, Cadaver and Megadeth. Thanks so much for listening.